All right, great. Thank you all who have joined us today for this webinar as part of our FSCUS revision process for the National Forest Stewardship Standard. My name is Amy Clark-Eagle. I'm the Director of Science and Certification, and I'm also serving as the coordinator for the Standard Development Group for this process. I'm joined by my colleague, Justin Meyer, and we also have a number of our Standards Development Group members here. They have their FSCUS board members. And I believe that we may also have one or two of our technical working group members on the call or on the webinar today as well. We're get started here by sharing my screen. And then we'll move into the webinar itself, the presentation itself. All right, gonna check with Justin. Thumbs up, can you see? Excellent. All right, so I'm going to begin with our antitrust statement. As participants in this meeting, we need to be mindful of the constraints of antitrust laws. There shall be no discussions of agreements or concerted actions that may restrain competition. This prohibition includes the exchange of information concerning individual prices, rates, market practices, or any other competitive aspect of an individual company's operation. Each participant is obligated to speak up immediately for the purpose of preventing any discussion falling outside these bounds. And while I recognize we're not going to have a lot of active engagement today, since you'll all be able to see what others are typing into the chat box, please remember this and keep it in mind. So we are in the middle of the public consultation period for draft 1 of the revised FSCUS National Forest Stewardship Standard. This will be version 2 of our national standard. The consultation period is 75 days, began on October 5th, and will be ending on December 18th. Reminder that you need to submit comments through the FSC consultation platform. This can be found, a link to it can be found through the consultation web pages, and you can see the address right there on your screen. There's also some additional resources to help you and assist you with kind of navigating the consultation platform, and perhaps even to assist you when trying to think about priorities for your engagement in this public consultation. Another reminder that we are right now in the first phase of this public consultation. So draft 1 has been separated into 2 pieces. The first piece is what we're calling the base indicators. Those are the indicators that will be applicable to most forest management units that are certified. The second part of the draft 1 consultation will focus on the alternate indicators for plantations, family forests, etc., and also the supplementary requirements for U.S. Forest Service lands. And that'll be initiated in the coming months. Okay, so for today, overall, the objective is to help provide an opportunity to answer questions, get a better understanding of the issues that are the focus for today, and that will hopefully assist you as you're working to put together your formal comments for the consultation. We had initially hoped to have more of a discussion format, but we've had a fair number more people register for the webinars than initially anticipated. So we're going to focus on asking you to submit questions via the chat box, and then we will be answering those as we can. If by chance there's not enough questions to fill the time, then maybe we'll have a little bit more opportunity for some open dialogue. We are asking you to remain muted As Justin noted in the chat box, everyone was muted on entry. We're going to try just leaving it up to you to control your mute button, just in case we've got a point where we need to ask some folks to speak. But Justin has control. He has the power to mute you if he so wishes. So just remember that. And also remember that we are recording this webinar and it will be publicly available afterwards. Okay, so today we have a focus of 2 topics. The first being Indigenous peoples' rights and local communities' rights, particularly as they are related to free, prior, and informed consent. And then the second topic is forced workers. So moving into the first topic. All right. The first one is free, prior, and informed consent. And overall, this is considered to be a really, really important component of the self-determination of Indigenous peoples in particular. But basically what it does is it provides a way for engagement with the holders of rights for local communities, some local communities, and also for Indigenous peoples. And it provides a framework for the dialogue and exchange of information about protecting these rights and about ensuring that the rights holder understands what's being planned and the potential impact on their rights, and provides them with that control and that ability to decide about what they are willing and not willing to live with when it comes to potential impacts on those rights. And so with free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC, as it's sometimes abbreviated, this gives the rights holder the ability to provide consent for activities to continue, to withhold consent for having those activities continue, to say maybe but not right now, or to provide consent with conditions. One of the important things that has come out of a lot of the global dialogue around free, prior, and informed consent is to keep in mind that while agreement on a particular planned management activity that may affect rights is an important and key outcome of FPIC, of free, prior, and informed consent, just as important is the development of the engagement and the relationship between the individual or the organization and entity responsible for the management activities that are planned and the holder of the rights. Some aspects of free, prior, and informed consent are included in our existing standard, but they certainly are not provided with the same kind of overall framework and concept that's been incorporated into the principles and criteria of version 5. In particular, our existing standard focuses on the free and the informed part, but there's less of a focus on the prior. For draft 1, the document that's currently out for public consultation, the rights are being handled kind of in 3 buckets. There's a bucket of rights, which are rights that are held by individuals. And these are primarily addressed through Principle 1. And then there are rights that are held by Native American groups, which are primarily addressed in Principle 3. And then rights that are held by local communities, and these are primarily addressed in Principle 4. For the rights held by Native American groups and local communities, it's important to understand the differentiation here is that this is focused on rights that are held at a communal level, as opposed to being held by individuals. For the purposes of draft 1, looking at the US context, the rights held by Native American groups is focused on both legal and customary rights, with customary rights, the definition there being focused on rights that have been exercised regularly and continuously to a point where they're essentially accepted as being legal. And then for local communities, the focus is just on legal rights. In the framework of the US, it's anticipated that anything on a rights front when it comes to these to local communities will already be incorporated into the legal framework of our society. And because we're talking about things held at a communal level here, it's anticipated that these are actually going to be fairly rare. But this is one of the things that we are interested in hearing about through this consultation process. Okay, so then more specifically about FPIC, about free, prior, and informed consent. The consideration of when a free, prior, and informed consent process needs to be applied is the scope is actually a little bit further narrowed in the draft one that's out for consultation. So FPIC is expected to be used when addressing legal and customary rights held by federally and state recognized Native American groups, legal rights that are held by other Native American groups, and legal rights that are held by force-dependent local communities and traditional peoples. So you'll note that this does not include the full set of local communities that may be affected by management activities, but instead it's focused more on those that are most likely to be really affected and where the rights would be more likely to be really embedded in that local community. So something to be very clear about is that free, prior, and informed consent is not required for all engagement with the different types of communities. It's just to be used when dealing with one of these certain kinds of rights in a situation where it may be affected by management activities within the management unit. And the other big addition to draft one is a new annex that includes guidance related to culturally appropriate engagement and communication with both local communities and Native American groups, and also provides guidance regarding free, prior, and informed consent and the different steps that a process might go through, or a certificate holder. Just really briefly, these are the steps that are laid out in that guidance. And there's a bit of overlap here with some of the other indicators in Principles 3 and Principles 4, but they are part of an overall free, prior, and informed consent process. So first of all would be to assess and identify communities that may have affected rights, and then identify the appropriate contact within those communities, somebody who can represent the community as a whole. And then through engagement with that community or Native American group, assess and identify the rights that might be affected by proposed or planned management activities. Then the certificate holder should also go through a process to verify those rights, that, are they in fact legal rights? Is there in fact evidence that there are customary rights in place? So this is part of what a certificate holder would do. And then determine if the rights holder wishes to engage in a free, prior, and informed consent process. And it's possible that they may decline that kind of engagement. If so, those rights still must be protected. They can't be violated. And the rights holder should be treated as an affected stakeholder. But the planning of the management activities in question could continue forward as long as those rights are not violated. Then finally, when and in a situation where the rights holder does wish to engage, you'd move through a process to get to a decision on those proposed activities. And the guidance provides some additional considerations, such as some of the different components of that process to reach a decision that might be important to define and identify in advance, that these are the different things that should need to be agreed upon. And perhaps working first to define what does an agreement look like and provide some criteria around to help determine when that agreement has been achieved. And the indicators also require that the agreement be documented. So I think with that, that was the introduction for this particular topic. I am going to stop sharing my screen and give all of you an opportunity to type some questions into the comment box. While we're doing that, I also would like to ask if the chair of our Standard Development Group, Paul Vanderford, would like to say a few words. So Paul, I think you need to unmute yourself. There you
go. Yes, good morning. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the moment to talk. I've actually come onto this call a little bit late, Amy, so I apologize. The only thing I'd bring up is what I've brought up in terms of just a cheerleader for process, which is thank you all for your time, and that we only function with input from our chambers, and that's what gives us strength, based in science, supported by 3 chambers. So we welcome all input, and we will do our best to recognize the points of view that are brought forward and to include them in our thinking. So I will end there because I feel a little bit out of place going further than that at this point, but I look forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. At this point, we don't have any questions that have been typed into the chat box. So while folks are thinking about that, we've got a number of other Standard Development Group members on the call here. And if any of you would like to make a comment, whether it's directly regards to the social issues that we're discussing here today, or generally, I would welcome you to do that at this time. You have the ability to unmute yourself. All right, not today. Okay, that's fine.
Amy here, Mike Hauser here. I'm an FPIC board member, and I was going to wait till the end of the call, but since it's quiet now, I might as well say something right now. Welcome everybody, and thank you for your interest and time. And all I was going to say was, these 3 webinars hit some of the highlights, some very important issues that will draw a lot of attention. But I would also encourage everyone to make sure they read through the entirety of the standard, because there's a lot more there than just these topics that we're hitting in these webinars. And I think it's very important to make sure everyone spends as much time as they can and plan in advance for some good time to invest in the standard review. So thanks.
Great.
Yeah, this is Shona Humphreys. I'll just echo that. I just saw some great questions popping up, so I didn't want to take too much time, but just thanks everyone for participating, and I hope this can help answer any questions that you have and lead to a fruitful discussion. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you both very much. All right, so we have a question, which is, can you provide an example of a local community group that was, or a local community right that was envisioned for that aspect of FPIC? Yeah, so as noted both in the draft standard and in the slides that I had and presented a minute ago, it is recognized that the communal, having communal rights, so at the level of a community, it's anticipated to be fairly rare in the US, but may not be entirely absent. One of the examples that came up in conversation in our technical working group is that it sounds like in Louisiana, there may be some rights of access that are held within the legal system for communities in terms of being able to access different areas for different purposes. So that would be a potential example. It's likely going to be based on the legal framework at a state or perhaps even a more local area where these kinds of rights have been instilled into the legal framework. And then there's another question, what's the difference between a legal right and a customary right? All right, so the definition in the standard of legal is in reference to legislation, regulations, and other related, the framework that ensures the consistent and accurate interpretation of those laws and the expectations related to them. So a legal right is one that's documented within that legal system, within the laws, legislation, and associated rules and whatnot. Whereas a customary right may not be written down anywhere within the legal framework, but where the practice and the exercise of that right has been repeated consistently over time in a similar way, in a similar place, to the extent to which everyone just treats it as if it were a legal right. And therefore it's come to be a customary right. And if we don't have any more questions, I'll give it another minute. We can move on to our other topic for today. So a follow-up question, what if everyone doesn't agree that it's a customary right? I think that that's a situation where this would be addressed through the process of an audit, and the certification body would look at the evidence that is there and presented to them related to the exercise of that right and how closely it meets the definition of customary right. Beyond that, if there comes a time when there's a need for further interpretation or guidance or verifiers, that would be something that we would work on with the certification bodies to help ensure consistent application of the definition that's in the standard. Okay, well, then we can move to the second topic. And I'm going to share my screen again.
Amy, I just wanted to also say thank you to everyone for joining and for your work on this to explain and walk through these really important topics. I appreciate it very much. And by the way, this is Brent Davis, also on the board.
Yep, and Brent represents our environmental chamber. Thanks, Brent. All right, so we're gonna play from the current slide. And Justin, can you see the slideshow? Excellent. All right, so moving into the second topic identified for today, it's forest workers. And the concept of ensuring that human rights and workers' rights and benefits are embedded in the standards of the Forest Stewardship Council. That's been part of the standards and the overall scheme from the very, very beginning of FSC. They include considerations, have included and continue to include considerations of the health, safety, and well-being and livelihoods of workers. There is, within the principle and criteria version 5, there's much more of a focus on ensuring the incorporation of internationally recognized principles and rights. And this also relates back to the last topic, where it's bringing the free, prior, informed consent more into the FSC system and framework. And there are some of these elements that are included in the existing standard, but there are a number that are new and being addressed in a slightly different way in terms of the changes, particularly the change in the definition of worker. So the definition of worker now explicitly includes both contractors and their employees, as well as the employees and both also subcontractors and their employees. This is a change from the indicators that are in the existing standard that are much more focused on just the employees of the certified organization. There's also a new focus on being very clear about the basic principles and rights of workers and the expectations around those, and also on gender equity. You'll notice in principle 2, which is where workers are now addressed, it's the entirety of the focus of principle 2 now, that there are certain indicators which are explicitly about workers. And that would include, as previously noted, contractors, some subcontractors, and employees of those, in addition to the employees of the certified organization. But there are some indicators there that are specifically focused on just the employees of the certified organization. One of the other changes is that there's additional guidance for when training may be needed. Training has been a part of the existing standard and an expectation there. There's now a new annex, which provides a framework and ideas and suggestions for when training may be applicable, depending upon the management activities that are occurring within the management unit. And obviously this might be different from one worker to the next. As part of working on developing the draft 1 document, there have been a number of concerns and a number of issues for which the standard development group doesn't feel that they've fully resolved and come to a satisfying conclusion. So they're looking for further input from all of you on some of these issues related to forest workers. You'll see that there are a number of consultation questions within the consultation platform that are pretty specific to forest workers. In addition, the Standard Development Group has asked FSC US staff to organize a forest workers forum. And this is to have a really in-depth conversation around some of the criteria and indicators that are in Principle 2. They've identified some concerns, particularly related to migrant and undocumented workers who may be hired by contractors to provide important services to certified organizations. And while recognizing that the certified organizations themselves are more than likely following the complete legal framework in terms of safety and well-being of workers and the US labor laws and state labor laws, There is concern that that may not always be the case when it comes to the employees of contractors and subcontractors who are working within the certified management unit. And so with that, the other concern identified by the Standard Development Group that they really want to try and dig into through this forum is determining feasibility for certified organizations when trying to deal with and address some of the indicators, and particularly when it's related to contractors and employees of contractors. When an organization has some limitations on what they believe they can require or ensure when it comes to contractors, what would be the most feasible way for them to demonstrate that they are in fact trying to achieve the intent of a particular indicator. So this is what the forum is intended to work on. Anything that comes out of it related to potential different ways of framing indicators to achieve the principles and criteria, or the potential for coming up with verifiers to help an organization determine what kind of evidence would show conformance. These are the kinds of outcomes that we're hoping for from this forum, and these will be considered by the Standard Development Group as they work to develop draft 2. And I think that is the set of questions that I have for this, or excuse me, set of slides that I have for this particular issue. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and look and see. It looks like we've got a question here. How would timber buyers fall within this definition? In other words, purchasers of standing timber and for which the certified organization has no control over harvest timing, harvest organization, trucking organization. So the workers, the definition of workers includes individuals who are implementing management activities associated with the management unit that are being implemented to achieve the management objectives that are outlined in the management plan. So in that situation, that timber buyer who is working to potentially set up or deal with the harvest, if that activity is an essential component of achieving a management activity, then they would be considered a worker within the definition that's included in the draft 1 standard. And that would likely be similar for individuals who are part of a logging organization, trucking organization, and others who are, again, implementing those activities if they are an essential component of achieving the management objectives. There's a question, does the Policy and Standards Committee have anyone who represents logging companies? Further, while I appreciate the emphasis on workers, has there been any attention placed on the role of logging companies who actually hire and supervise employees along with their contractual obligations, their overall financial health, or their contracts and practices with subcontractors? Okay, so I think you're referencing we have a U.S. Policy and Standards Committee. It's a subcommittee of the FSC-US board, and this committee is providing recommendations to the full board, and our FSC-US board is serving as the standard development group for this process. So this committee has an important role when it comes to the work that's being done by the Standard Development Group. The Policy and Standards Committee, Ted Wright, who is a new member of the FSCUS board, I believe is able to represent some of the interests and perspectives of loggers. He has a close relationship with logging companies in the northeast part of the US. And so I think that would be the individual who would be most apt to provide that kind of perspective. Has there been attention placed on the role of logging companies who hire and supervise employees and their contractual obligations and overall financial health of contracts? And I think that these kinds of issues, if we're looking at it from a how are the logging companies doing, how are they doing financially, how are they doing in terms of economic prosperity, I would say that would be an element that should be addressed by the certificate holder or by the certified organization as it relates to the expectations for activities and efforts to help promote and increase the economic prosperity of the local communities and provide economic opportunities for working and jobs on the management unit. I think that's where that would likely play into the standard, as the loggers are certainly a very important component of the local economy. When it comes to their employees, since they're working to achieve the management objectives within the management unit, those workers would also fall under the definition of worker. All right. Okay, and as Shona is reminding me, while Ted Wright is a new board member and is representing and will be participating in the development of draft 2 of the National Forest Stewardship Standard, he was not part of the draft 1, so he'll bring a new perspective to the draft 2 development. Okay, and Justin has reminded me something that I didn't say, which is we're inviting all of you to indicate an interest to participate in the Forest Workers Forum. We are trying to keep it at a size where we can represent the different interests involved in workers' issues, but at the same time with enough breadth of perspective to bring the different aspects and concerns and questions to the table. So if you are interested in participating in that forum, I encourage you to send an email to us. The address is at the public consultation web pages, but it's fm.revision.us.fsc.org. And let us know of your interest and give us a little bit of background in terms of your experiences, knowledge, and what you think you would bring to the forum. And we encourage all of you to send us an email and let us know. And we'd be happy to try and bring a very round set of perspectives to this issue. At this time, I'm not seeing any further questions. We have some time left. So I think that we can certainly open up. Oh, one thing I do need to remember to say is that while we are definitely bringing this information the questions from the webinar today and any comments that we may receive today certainly will be part of the considerations of those board members that are here, and will be documenting the concerns and issues that came up. But this doesn't replace the need for submission of formal comments. So please, we encourage you to take your thoughts, your concerns, your suggestions for improvements, and use the consultation platform to submit those as formal comments. And then those will also come back to the Standard Development Group for use and consideration as they develop draft 2. All right, so, oh, there is one more question here. And our legal counsel advises us to deal with our contractors at arm's length, making it impossible to have much input with respect to their employees. How will this standard address this? So Scott, thank you. That is exactly the issue and the concern that came up as from and through the Standard Development Group. How is it that we can achieve or we can find ways for certified organizations to show evidence of conformance with indicators when it comes to this expanded scope and definition of forest workers? And that's what we are looking to try and achieve with that Forest Workers Forum, and through inputs received with this public consultation, is thinking about what is it that an organization has the ability to do. Are there different issues or items that can be addressed through contracts? Are there different ways that organizations could show that they are intentionally looking to work with contractors that have really good track records when it comes to the health and safety and care and well-being of their workers? What are the other things that organizations can do to show that they're trying to address the intent of these criteria and indicators, and do it within the US context?
Amy, a quick question related to Scott's question in your answer. To provide guidance, since the workers forum, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that would be material or information used in draft 2, is the intent to develop further guidance for draft 1? Because a lot of these issues have been played out within different parts of the country already under FSC and also other existing certification programs. So how do you intend to provide information to certifying bodies as well as certified organizations?
So the draft 1 that's out for public consultation right now, that is not ever going to be used for assessing conformance for a certified organization. We need to go through 3 different drafts before we submit the standard for approval with FSC International. And then that final document is the one that would be approved and then published, and then there would be a transition period. And that's when conformance and the assessment by auditors and certification bodies would start to occur. So what we're doing right now is, by moving from draft 1 to draft 2, is we're trying to integrate that kind of guidance, that kind of information, whether it's through verifiers or just guidance language, but trying to get that into the body of the draft revised standard, so that when it goes for approval and then gets published, it's in there and will be available to those CBs and auditors for that conformance assessment. Does that answer your question, Victoria?
It does. Thanks very much for walking through that.
Yep. Okay, and I'm sorry I missed your question previously. Apologies. Okay, so since we don't have a whole lot of typed comments or questions at this time, if there are individuals who would like to provide some verbal comment or ask a verbal question, as I noted previously, we do have a number of our standard development group members who are on the call, who I'm sure would be interested in hearing your perspective and your comments. I will again repeat, this is not a replacement for submitting those via the the consultation platform, but certainly you're welcome to share those perspectives, comments at this time if you would wish. I think it might be helpful though, at the bottom of the participants list, if you look at the bottom of your screen, one of the things you can click on is participants, and it's got a little 39 there right now because we've got 39 of you. When you open up that window that shows the list of people, at the very bottom, there's an icon, which is raise hand. And so if you would like to speak, if you could raise your hand, that'd be great, and we'll recognize you. Okay, well, it seems like we don't have any further comments or questions. And so I think, oh wait, I think I missed one. Apologies. Let me get there. All right, so can you speak further about the definition of forced worker? Sounds like independent logging and truckers qualify. What about leases, as in the case of a sugar bush lease? And then what about contractors who engage with the leasee, such as sugar bush tubing installers? So I think this is one that I think we would need to potentially go back. I can pull up the definition here potentially in just a minute, but I think that one of the key pieces here would be for the sugar bush, is that part of the management objectives that are related to the standard and achievement of the standard and the desired future conditions. It might depend on whether or not the resulting product or non-timber forest product is going to be certified. I think that's one that we might need to dig into a little bit more, but certainly would encourage you to provide any thoughts or comments that you have as to whether you think they should or should not be considered under the definition. And I think that that would be helpful in terms of input to the standard development group. But Andrew, we will make a note of this one. I think we need to go back and take another quick look at that and then loop back around to you afterwards. All right. So I'm going to just one final call out if anyone would like to speak, provide a comment, any standard development group members. And if not, then we will move to close out the webinar for today.
Hi, this is Shona again. I would just say that, this is really useful to get these kind of scenarios and questions. And so any others that come to mind, please forward those to us with any concerns. And it really helps us round out the standard to make sure it's applicable to all these situations. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Shona. And all of the rest of you, thank you again for participating in the webinar today. We really, really appreciate your engagement, your participation. This is what Forest Stewardship Council is all about. It's bringing different perspectives, different interests together and trying to find some kind of common path forward that continues to achieve our overall mission and objectives and ensuring responsible forest management and certified forests. So thank you very much for your time today. And we're at this point gonna say thank you and goodbye. So appreciate you coming.